Hello. Today I have amazing, exciting news. I have solved a centuries-old debate. I've decided I have a solution between two camps within the English language. I'm telling you that today, if you watch this video, if you share it with your friends, this crisis, this rift, this division between two camps in the English language will be resolved forever. I guarantee it. Have I got your attention? Alright, today we're going to be talking about the Oxford comma, or the serial comma, or as some people call it, the Harvard comma. I like serial comma though, that seems to be the most neutral. It is the comma that goes before the and in a list, as in we need to buy eggs, bacon, comma, and milk. Or, as some would have it, we need to buy eggs, comma, bacon, no comma, and milk. As you are probably well aware, there is a massive division in the English language as to whether or not you should use the Oxford or the serial comma. Why? Well, that's a complicated question, and we're gonna get right down into the dirty details. Okay, let's rewind a little bit. Let's start from the beginning, because before we discuss our solution, because my friends, I have a solution. I've fixed it, guarantee it. Before we discuss the solution to the problem, we need to understand our history. And the history of the comma doesn't begin within the English language. It begins, as many things have begun, in Italy, where I live, coincidentally. The inventor, shall we call him, though the comma was in use, there are records of comma-like instances in literature before this, but the inventor of the comma is generally agreed to be by historians and linguists Aldo Manuzio. He was an Italian printmaker. He lived in Venice. He was very interested in preserving Greek literature, particularly classic Greek literature, because he lived during the time of the Renaissance, where everyone was preserving all sorts of historical manuscripts and being Renaissance men and doing paintings and art and inventions. What a time to be alive. Anyway, he was very interested in preserving the classics and making them accessible to people. He is credited with inventing the modern portable book, because it used to be that they had these giant books that you couldn't carry around unless you were really strong, I guess. But he wanted to make reading a portable activity. Thank heavens he did. Like, what a world we have now that we have portable books. So thank you, Aldo Manuzio. Have you ever noticed that so many good things come from Italy? Aldo Manuzio needed to come up with a way to show a connection between two sentences, but not use a full stop, or as we say in American English, the period. He wanted to connect sentences and show they were separate and distinct things, but at the same time not have such a harsh break. So essentially what he did was he gave a full stop a tail. How handy. And we have the modern comma. Previously, what had been available to printmakers was a slash. Could you imagine if we put a slash everywhere we put a comma? Aldo Manuzio invented the modern comma. He was also a printmaker, and his prints were very popular throughout the various kingdoms in Italy and also throughout France and further into Europe, and eventually the comma trickled into the English language because it is a convenient and a really handy-dandy way to connect thoughts without breaking up thoughts. You don't want to have words strung together endlessly with no punctuation. That's really confusing to read. With commas, we can put multiple clauses together without having to worry about breaking up our sentences into a bunch of tiny sentences that are annoying to read. He is tall, he is fat, he went out, he went back in. Nobody wants to read that. It sounds ridiculous. Anyway, the comma became popular and commonly, can I make that into a pun? commonly used. Sure, it's a pun and it's hilarious. Laugh. Then, around the time of the 1800s, prescriptive grammarianism, we shall say. A more prescriptive approach to grammar became more popular, meaning that instead of grammar and the rules, if we can call them, of the English language arising from natural changes that the speakers and the writers of the English language make and adapt as they need, grammar became a much more, these are the absolute rules of grammar that you must follow in order to be considered a good and credible writer. Now, prescriptive grammar, though I'm not a huge fan of prescriptive grammar, is not always a terrible thing. Part of it arose simply from a utilitarian need to preserve space. With the rise of printmaking and the kind of fall of the handwritten manuscripts, it became much more necessary to have a more standardized approach to language and writing and printing, simply because it was easier and more realistic for printmakers to follow a certain pattern. Remember that when printmaking happened, they had to take each individual letter and stamp it out on these giant presses, and that was a time-consuming effort. So having a sort of standardized approach, for example, Oxford, where the name of the Oxford comma comes from, if they're going to be publishing a journal, they want all of the writing in that journal to have the same sort of standard to make their printmaking process faster. So the rise of prescriptive grammar isn't some sort of evil plot to say, you're wrong, you're not writing correctly, you have bad grammar. Part of it was simply a utilitarian need. Anyway, the University of Oxford decided they were going to include the comma at the end of a list. We need to buy eggs, bacon, and milk. I don't know why that's my example. I never buy milk. So the University of Oxford decided they needed this comma. And one of the strongest arguments that I've heard for the use of the serial or the Oxford comma is that it gives each item in the list equal importance. For example, he was tall, dark, comma, and handsome. This man being tall, dark, and handsome, all three of those adjectives are of equal importance to this he. The other compelling argument for the serial comma is that it adds clarity where there could be ambiguity. And here, my friends, is where things start to get messy. This is where the drama begins. This is where the story gets juicy, shall we say. But don't fear, I have an answer for us. So we have the serial comma. It adds clarity and it gives each item in a list equal importance. On the other hand, we have instances where the serial comma adds ambiguity to our writing and actually causes confusion instead of creating clarity. Oh, look at that alliteration. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at examples of two versions of the serial comma. We're going to look at one example where the serial comma was necessary to bring clarity to a piece of writing. And then we're going to look at another example where the serial comma actually brought confusion.
Let's look at an example of when the serial comma is necessary. Rachael Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. What? She cooks her family and her dog? Terrible. That is terrible behavior. Goodness gracious. Okay, let's put a comma there just because I don't know who permitted this to go to press. Not cool. So, Rachael Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. What is the problem with this? Well, it still kind of sounds like she's cooking her family and her dog. Her family and her dog become an appositive. What is she cooking? Her family and her dog. I seriously hope not. That is just so wrong. But we can add clarity by adding in another comma. We've got our first comma here, and we've got the serial comma right before the coordinating conjunction there. Rachael Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. She finds inspiration in three different things: in cooking, in her family, and in her dog. There you go. The commas eliminate the ambiguity in this example, and they are important to have. Now, this is not really great writing, but it does show that there are some instances when you are listing out things that you would need the serial comma in order to create clarity. All right, let's look at this sentence here. The student thanked her principal, Snoop Dogg, and her little brother. All right, I would say that the serial comma is not necessary here because if you add in this little comma right there, the student thanked her principal, Snoop Dogg, and her little brother. It kind of sounds like Snoop Dogg is her principal, which I hope Snoop Dogg isn't a principal. If any rapper is going to be a principal, it should obviously be Kendrick Lamar. Let's go with that. Snoop Dogg, I would not recommend him being the principal of any school. And it just sounds like, in this case, Snoop Dogg is the principal because with this comma, you're creating an appositive. You're not creating clarity. You're not making the list seem clear. It sounds like the writer of this sentence is clarifying that her principal is Snoop Dogg, not that she's thanking three different people, her principal, Snoop Dogg, and her little brother. This comma is not necessary. It would be better if we eliminated it or if we just revised the sentence entirely.
Okay, so we have two examples. Sometimes it's necessary to use the serial comma. Most editors would say if it's necessary to create clarity, use it. On the other hand, we have the serial comma creating confusion, in which case most editors would say leave it out if it creates confusion. What about an instance where the serial comma is neutral? And here is where the story gets even more complicated and even juicier. This is the heart of the division, because you have those who argue the serial comma should only be used when it is necessary to create or give clarity to writing. And then you have other people who argue that the serial comma should only be eliminated when it creates confusion. In all other times, it ought to be used. What do you say? Do you say use the serial comma only when necessary? Or do you say eliminate the serial comma only when necessary? I won't tell you what I say yet. But here is the heart of the argument. What happens when you have a sentence where you could add the serial comma or you could take away the serial comma and it doesn't make a difference? What should we do in a sentence like that? So let's look at an example. And let's do the classic, he was tall, dark, and handsome. In this sentence, there can absolutely be no ambiguity. There is only he. He was tall, dark, and handsome. All three of those adjectives must be referring to that pronoun. Okay, there can be no ambiguity in this sentence. It's not a particularly interesting sentence, but it functions as our example. In this case, should we add in the serial comma or not? What should the rule be? This, my friends, is the heart of the division. Welcome to the eye of the storm. Those who say that we should add in the serial comma say that it's necessary because it adds an extra layer of clarity. It really shows tall, dark, comma, and handsome that those three adjectives are referring to he. And also, the comma functions as a natural indicator of a place to pause. When a person is speaking, they will say he was tall, dark, and handsome. I literally took a breath when I said that, even though I said it quickly, and the comma can give us a kind of natural rhythm that we get in spoken English. It reflects that on the paper. So it's not necessary from a meaning standpoint, but from a style and rhythm standpoint, it is necessary. The anti-serial comma, when it is not ambiguous group, would say eliminate it simply because it is not necessary. And why would you want to clutter your writing if it's not necessary to put it there? If there's no ambiguity, leave it out. And to this I say, people who are pro serial comma, even when there's no ambiguity, and people who are anti-serial comma, even when there is no ambiguity, you are both wrong. Because we, the speakers of the English language, we are looking at the wrong enemy. The enemy is not if you are anti-serial comma, the pro-serial comma people, and the enemy, if you are serial comma people, is not the anti-serial comma people. We are not each other's enemies. We are the free speakers of the English language. The real enemy is the prescriptive grammarians who like to think that there ought to be a rule over something that is by nature ambiguous. If you love that comma, if you think, I want a comma right there because it gives a natural pause, as many do in spoken English, and because it adds that extra level of clarity that I want to have in my writing, then go live your best life and add in that comma. It is not grammatically wrong. If you think that comma is a little excessive for me, I'm more of a minimalist with my writing, then leave it out. Great, you are not wrong. We can live in a world where both of those comma uses, yes or no, are correct. They are both grammatically correct. They both function fine in writing. We can learn to accept each other. Those who love the serial comma and those who are serial comma skeptics. They are both fine, as long as you use the serial comma when it's necessary to add clarity, and as long as you take away the serial comma when it creates confusion. Then the other neutral instances, I say with whatever authority I have as an English language speaker, both are correct and both can be really beautiful and really effective. Use them both as you see fit. Now, I'm a firm believer in the drama, and what we need, you and me, speakers of the English language, people who like our freedom to put our commas where we see fit, thank you very much, we need a new enemy. Who might this enemy be? Well, I'll tell you. I think I mentioned it a little bit before, but our enemy needs to be prescriptive grammarians who would take something that is by nature ambiguous, a neutral comma, and seek to put a rule on it, which would take away the freedom of so many writers around the world, speakers, people who use the English language on a daily basis. Why, dear prescriptive grammarians, would you want to take that freedom away? What are you trying to do? What kind of tricks are you trying to pull? So, comma users of the English language, whether you are pro-serial comma in an unambiguous situation or anti-serial comma in an unambiguous situation, we need to unite against people who would say there is a particular rule about this, because the fact of the matter is there should not be a rule about this. It should be up to the writer and the editor. Whatever makes the sentence have better rhythm, whatever makes the sentence more compelling, different people are going to have different feelings about how to make the sentence excellent. And we need to be allowed to debate that and mull over that and dialogue over that, because that is what makes us better writers and better users of the English language. So I say to you, pro and anti serial comma users, our true enemy is not the other camp in the comma debate. Our true enemy is so obviously prescriptive grammarians, and I can prove it to you. Apparently, in England, if you put a serial comma in when it would be an unambiguous instance, it does not add clarity, nor does it take away clarity, you can be marked wrong. That means that students don't have the freedom to decide which comma works better for them, which version of the sentence is not up to the writer. It's up to some random people who decided that this was a rule. And I'm sorry, but my friends, users of the English language, writers, speakers, people across many nations who speak English, that is not a decision that grammarians should make. That is a decision that you should make because you are the user of the English language. So I know that was a long ramble about the serial comma, and let me tell you, I feel very strongly about this. When it is unambiguous, when the serial comma neither adds nor takes away from the meaning of the sentence, it really should be up to the writer and the editor what is best. So hopefully, serial comma lovers and serial comma skeptics, you can stop looking toward each other for an enemy and you can unite in our common enemy, which would be prescriptive grammarians who like to take the spaces within the English language where you have the freedom and beauty of expression, who like to take that away and make it into a rule. Why? There's no reason for it. I stand for the freedom of expression within the English language. We should be allowed to use serial commas as we like when it is unambiguous. Now, after all that, do you want to know where I stand with the serial comma? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. Personally, I like the serial comma when it's not necessary to add clarity. For example, he was tall, dark, comma, and handsome. That is my preferred way. I like it for 3 reasons. 1, that it obviously links every adjective back to that noun or pronoun at the beginning or the end of the sentence. 2, I like that it looks symmetrical. It feels weird to me that there's no comma before the and. It looks like there should be one there. That could possibly be because I've used one my whole life, but I like the symmetry of it. It's like comma, 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 comma. Plus, and this is completely subjective, the comma is a cute punctuation mark. It just looks so cute. It wants to be in there, living its best life. Again, that's completely subjective, and I respect your right to leave it out if you feel you don't need it. And then the third reason that I find the serial comma to be important is that it gives a natural pause. Linking with the idea of a natural pause, I also think it helps to put in the serial comma when it's not absolutely necessary, because I think that it's easier when editing to take things out of a piece of writing than to add things back in. Similarly, if you're going outside on a day where the weather is all over the place, it's easier to take off a raincoat than to produce one out of nowhere. And so if you are writing a first draft, I always think it's better to go for more and then to edit back down later than to have something really sparse and to try to edit stuff back in afterwards. That's just my personal way of approaching writing. You might be different. Again, remember who your true enemy is. It's the prescriptive grammarians. Alright guys, let me know if you want more content about controversies within the English language. I do love a good controversy. I love a good historical drama, especially when it comes to punctuation, because nothing, exclamation point, conveys drama like punctuation. I'm serious. Alright, bye.